So this panel is interesting. We've had a bunch of funding panels at past year Seedcamps, and we decided to switch it up a little bit. So we have the first part of this whole thing. Joss and Chris from Notion Capital, who build Message Labs, who are also Seedcamp investors, talk about their entrepreneurial journey, and then also kind of seeing the other side of the table, becoming VCs and being VCs. And the second part is Nikolaj and Nyholm, who joined Sunstone Capital after building 4 companies, exited the most recent one to Apple, and so also a great entrepreneur who we're very glad to join us on this. And then afterwards, we're going to take a couple of questions from you guys. I already received a couple of questions beforehand from some of the companies and some of the mentors, so we're going to go through those as well. I think it's going to be really entertaining and hopefully shed some light on both the VC and entrepreneurial thinking. So without further ado.
Thanks, Philip. Hi, everybody. My name is Joss White. I'm a partner at Notion Capital. I very much see myself, as Philip said, as an entrepreneur turned investor. I've been an entrepreneur for a lot longer than I've been an investor. So I still see myself, I'm a little bit confused about my identity, but what it has given me is an understanding of both sides of the table. I think there's often a bit of a disconnect between entrepreneurs on one side and investors on the other. So we thought we'd try and share some insights and some things that we learned along the way to try and help entrepreneurs get more connected with investors and hopefully lead to more successful outcomes. And then Chris is going to turn it over and talk about how investors can maybe think more about their audience and get more connected to entrepreneurs. So we're just trying to kind of address that mismatch a little bit and kind of help two sides to sort of get on the same wavelength a little bit more than they do. So this first slide is just a little bit of background on where I've come from. We actually, this is the various companies that I've been involved with, and the line shows the growth in internet users. So it always makes me feel a bit old when I see this. I was born in 1969, and I think the internet came about around about the same time. But it wasn't really kind of commercialized until the 90s. My first business was actually buying and selling second-hand IBM equipment, which barely qualifies as tech. And it's a horrible business with very low margins. But what it did do is it gave us a very early view that in the early 90s, the market was moving away from IBM mainframes and dumb terminals and that whole way of computing more towards PC-based networking and wide area networking. And this little company called Cisco seemed to be kind of at the forefront of that change. So we changed the whole company's focus. We changed the name to RBR Networks, and we became a Cisco distributor very, very early in the market. We grew RBR into Europe's largest supplier for Cisco with revenues of about $120 million, and we sold that business in '98. So we were certainly in the kind of right place at the right time with RBR. And I think that phase we kind of call the installation phase, where the internet was really getting built out, getting commercialized, and obviously Cisco made a lot of money out of that. At the same time, we founded one of the UK's first ISPs, which was called Star. That was in 1995. Star was focused on the mid-market. Back then, we thought ISPs were really either concentrating on the home market or on the large corporate market. So we set up Star to focus on the mid-market, try and provide some real hand-holding to help businesses get connected to the internet, because back then it was actually pretty complicated. So our first product was a single box to connect any network to the internet, and that kind of put us on the map as an ISP that was really trying to innovate and offer solutions rather than just a connection. But our big success came with Message Labs. Message Labs service was actually originally a prototype service within Star, which often happens. You think about a service within another company, and then that becomes a company in its own right. But we developed the world's first internet-level antivirus service. So we thought instead of loading up your antivirus software onto your own PCs, we could actually build a much better system within the fabric of the internet. So by doing that, we could actually look at the reputation of the sender, the reputation of the receiver of the email. We could look at the patterns of movement within the email. we could look within the email itself and compare it to a knowledge base of previous virus techniques and virus behavior, because viruses are always derivative of a previous one. And in doing all this, we could actually recognize new viruses dynamically without needing an update, without needing an exact match. So this service was really at the right place at the right time. The first virus that could piggyback on email was called the Melissa virus in '98, which some of you might remember, the older members of the group. Traditional antivirus software couldn't react quickly enough to email viruses. It was designed in a pre-internet age. So we were really in the right place at the right time. We were able to recognize these new threats dynamically. We patented the technology to manage reputation over email and to look at the movement patterns within email. And message apps grew very successfully off the back of that. We then moved into anti-spam, and we realized we could deploy much of the same technology to spam as we had to viruses. And message apps grew very, very successfully. I moved to the States in 2002 to run message apps in the US. And the US actually became our largest market over time. So we're one of the few European companies that went over to the States and really made it a success, which we were very proud of. So just racing forwards, we were actually in 2008 with message ads, we were gearing up for an IPO. By that time, the company had about $150 million of revenue. We were still growing by about 25% a year, so we were a strong IPO candidate. We were going to go public in London. It's going to be a big technology success story. That there aren't that many in London. But unfortunately, with the way the economy was unfolding, our banker said, you're not going to be able to go public because the economy's not healthy enough. But we'd used the fact that we were planning to go public to kind of elevate discussions with potential buyers. And we ended up selling to Symantec in 2008 for about $700 million, so about 5 times revenue. And that was, at the time, one of the largest SaaS transactions that there'd been in the market, certainly the largest one out of Europe. There have been a few larger ones since, but it was certainly it was a great exit for us. So after having a bit of time off, I think we always liked the idea of, Chris was involved in Star and then with message apps, both in the sales side and the whole organizational side, and he'll talk more about that. But we always liked the idea of actually becoming investors, because we thought that maybe we could bring a more entrepreneurial spirit to the world of investors. So we set up Notion in 2009, and we kind of describe ourselves as trying to be the investors that we wish we had had when we were entrepreneurs. And all I mean by that is just investors that have actually been there themselves, that have done it themselves, that have an understanding of what entrepreneurs are going through, but also real knowledge and experience of the markets that they're investing in. So you can turn to your investor and say, well, what did you do? It won't always be relevant, but so we're trying to be focused just on investing in SaaS, in B2B SaaS, because we think that's the best way that we can add value. And Notion invested Fund 1, which was about $30 million, and we've just raised Fund 2, which is about $120 million. And we're mainly just investing in Europe. So this is really the main thing I wanted to talk about, which is over the years of mainly of completely screwing things up, we've learned a lot about how to raise money. We raised $20 million with Star. We raised about $40 million with Message Ads. So in total, we've raised a decent amount of money. We were raising money in 1999, kind of 2000, so it was a little bit easier then with the whole kind of dot-com boom. We got in just in time. But these are just some of the things that I think are really important for entrepreneurs to think about when they're going out to raise money. And I think these are some of the things that will really help you connect to investors and lead to a more successful outcome. As I said, you learn a lot more from your screw-ups than you do from your successes. So the first one is, long before you even want to raise money, I think you want to nurture relationships with VCs. So at a really early stage, or I just want to, can I have a coffee with you? Can I run something by you? Good investors love to hear your story from an early stage. They love to be involved if it's just a 20-minute coffee or whatever. So I think to start to nurture those relationships before you need to raise money is a really good idea. So you've kind of got a group of investors all ready to go. I think you need to understand your needs as a business. So you shouldn't just raise money for the sake of raising money. A lot of people say, well, I've been going for a year, I've been going for 2 years, we've got a bit of revenue, we should just go out and raise $5 million or whatever. You should actually think about how much money do we actually need to raise and why. And any fundraising, it should, to raise several $1 million, you should demonstrate that that will be transformational in your business. Otherwise, why are you raising money, and why should anyone want to invest their money in your business? So it seems like a simple thing, but certainly with Star, we went to try and raise money. We had no idea what we wanted to do with it. We hadn't even thought about it. We said, well, you know, it's .com boom, we'll go and raise loads of money. But it's not the way to do it. It really isn't. Choice, I see a lot of people really pinning their hopes on one VC because they've got a really strong relationship or they've had some positive indications from that VC. I think that's a dangerous thing. I think you want to talk to as many as you can, as long as they kind of vaguely match up with, you know, the kind of company that you are. But I like the method of a long list of investors, getting that down to a short list that you really invest time with, and then making a selection. Never pin your hopes on one, because I think that can be dangerous. And again, we've kind of fallen into that trap, I think. I think prep is really important. The deck, obviously, is very important. But I think more than that is actually having a load of additional information in some kind of data room or on Dropbox or whatever. So you just do it once, you put it all in there, everyone has access to it, save you a lot of money. But also practicing your pitch. It seems like a simple thing, but we went into a lot of pitches to really important investors, like straight away at the beginning of the process. Whereas actually, why not run the pitch by your management team, your friends, your colleagues, whatever, people that you trust, and iterate it a few times before you go out and talk to investors. And when you do go out and talk to investors, talk to your less preferred ones first, because you learn so much with every presentation, and you keep improving it each time. So make sure that you do run it by some people and get some good feedback, and just keep kind of iterating it forwards. And I think Seedcamp's actually a great way of doing that. The credibility thing, I think, is really important. We see business plans where it's kind of revenue of 1 million, next year 5 million, next year 60 million. And it's just got no credibility. You just cross it out. You can't believe it. So I think that the credibility, you want to show an ambitious plan, but it should be backed up with assumptions which, wherever possible, are actually based off historical data. You know, this is our cost of acquisition, or we've spent X on sales and marketing, so if we spend Y on sales and marketing, we should better generate. You know, it should be based off assumptions. Assumptions should be based off evidence wherever possible. If you just say, oh, we just thought we could double it, and then we could multiply revenues by 10 times, whatever, you know, be ambitious, but have some credibility there. Better talk about how you arrived at your numbers.
Time, Joss.
It's time? All right, just give me a couple of minutes.
This is what it's like at pitches.
You see, I obviously haven't done enough prep. Keep the presentation short, ironically, is the next one. Obviously, I'm still learning.
It's all right, it's giving me less time to offend the investors.
So I think an investor has about 40 minutes attention span. Maybe sometimes only 30 minutes. So think about that. You don't need to get all your information across in the first meeting. Think about the key messages and think about actually telling a story, i.e. a story with a beginning, middle, and end. I think that's really important. And just key messages, all the rest can follow. You don't need to get all your information across in the first meeting. I think a demo is important because it brings the product to life. And I think it also gets an investor to understand how you're thinking about the product. So, you know, this is why we built the product in this way. This is what we're working on, that you're understanding your customers and you're improving the product in response to that. So I think just how you think about the product is as important as the product itself. And then I think follow-up is really important. So follow up a meeting with your key points. So just to keep reiterating your key points with an email, with a call or whatever, just to get investors have hundreds of different deals on the go at any one time. Just simple bullet points I think is important. And then I think proactive is really important. Is, you know, don't be afraid to ask for feedback. An investor should give you feedback. And don't be afraid to ask for negative feedback. So if an investor has negative feedback, if they have concerns, do your best to actually address those concerns. Actually be proactive about it. Don't just leave it with a stony silence. Say, so do you have any concerns? And when they say, well, these are what they are, try and address them. So be kind of proactive with that. And then guerrilla is kind of just keeping in touch after the meeting. So make sure you have a group of investors that you like. And any update, any reason to reach out to them, whether it's a piece in the media, whether it's a product announcement, whatever, keep kind of drip feeding information into them to just make sure you remain in the front of their minds. Because again, they've got lots of different deals going on at any one time. And then control is just to stay in control of the process. So if you let yourself be pushed around, you say, okay, you let the investor dictate the terms, dictate the process, that devalues what you're selling. This is your company, you're proud of it, it's valuable, stay in control, don't be pushed around too much. That enhances your value, your credibility, and will more likely lead to a good outcome. And then the fit is just, not all investors are a good fit. So make sure you talk to the ones that have a history of investing in your type of company. Make sure your interests are aligned. Make sure that it's not just about the valuation, but actually in terms of the value add that they can bring. Talk to other companies that they've invested in. And just make sure that the most important thing is that your interests are aligned together, rather than they're trying to get something different out of it than you, which really doesn't work so well. Anyway, so I've gone over time. So I'm now going to hand over to Chris, who's going to talk about the other side. Thank you.
Thanks, Joss. Hi. I think the fit, when Joss and I spoke about this, I think the fit was the really, really important thing because, believe it or not, VCs are businesses as well. So they're going through exactly the same sort of pain that you're going through about who are we, what do we do, who do we work with, what do we invest in. And the great thing is in terms of VCs connecting with entrepreneurs, if you look at some of their big business processes like deal origination, deal evaluation, by Christ do we need a network to leverage off. How do we find great deals? We find them from people that are in this room, from entrepreneurs. How do we evaluate deals in spaces that we perhaps don't understand as best as we might? We go into our market, we talk to our people. So this is a network around VCs that you can connect with. So when you're looking for a fit, to Joss's last point, and you're thinking, well, who shall I have invested in me? It's not just about the amount of money that they have available. You've got to think, well, who does do consumer? Who does B2B? Who invests in seed? Who invests in A? What are the deals that they've done before? So VCs instinctively within their business, they have a requirement to go out and network and connect, with entrepreneurs. And, this room's clearly full of VCs that are in that model, that are within that mindset. So before you go and meet a VC, you can quite easily figure out through the great tools that we have available on the internet, like, who are they connected to that I'm connected to. I can get to a deal that someone, a guy at Salesforce M&A referred to a deal that he knew nothing about, just heard that it was hot, and I knew the founder of someone that was in the same city that knew them. Equally, if you're going to go and see a VC, you can do exactly the same thing. You can go and find people that know me, they know what I'm like, so you can figure out the best way to position your business. So, so equally what Joss has said on the entrepreneur side is exactly the same on the VC side. So I think, to me, that's the really most important point to make, I think, with a limited amount of time that we've got available. And these are the sort of behaviours that at Notion, we think about the stuff that we need to be able to demonstrate when we're building a network and we're dealing with entrepreneurs. Naturally, as Joss says, we find ourselves slightly schizophrenic that we happen to be entrepreneurs that are institutionally investing. So the reality is we're a real sucker for an entrepreneur. We really want to hear your story. We're excited about your vision. It's within our DNA. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're remotely likely or interested in investing in your business, but our network might well be. Yeah? So I think you can ask for value. It surprises me the amount of entrepreneurs that don't ask me for my connections in a pitch, or nurturing relationships. I may have a relationship today that I invest in 4 or 5 years' time. I know that. That is what sort of makes my business tick. So, there's no value in this meeting, me talking to VCs about how to network, because I think they all know how to network. I think what's really important is to remind the entrepreneurs that the VCs are a business. Look at Seedcamp. We know its brand, we know what it does, how it does it, we understand the value. That's the same for another VC. So I think your entrepreneurial mindset gives you an opportunity to unlock who are you meeting with, what do they invest in, how do you position the business. And the other thing is the partner. The thing I like to know about the people that I'm doing business is what do they like when the shit hits the fan? Because I think as entrepreneurs we know that it's a long road of the shit hitting the fan on a regular basis, and you want to work with people that are able to help you through those periods. And whether that's add value or have the right sets of behaviours around that period of time, well, that's something that you kind of want to know. We want to know about it with the entrepreneur ought to want to know it with us. So I think on that, I'm going to hand over to Nikolaj. So Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so this is working. Good. So, as Phil said, I've been an entrepreneur myself. My first company was back in 1998. I dropped out as a college student in University of Copenhagen, studying history and economics. I actually used my, in Denmark we have a fantastic system of student grants, about $1,000 a month, and that was really my bootstrapping money. I've really been working hard, seriously been working hard in trying to get the system to recognize that this is, it's a fantastic education on its own. It's definitely value creating and so forth, and that we should actually allow in Denmark entrepreneurs or college students to spend their money. I mean, I was enrolled for probably 3 years after I didn't show up at class. Nobody ever checked me, and I've definitely paid my dues back in taxes. So the first company, Speed Names, global domain search. Back in '98, if you were in the UK, you could get a .co.uk and a .com.net.org. If you're in Denmark, DK .com.net.org. If you wanted a .de, you had to go to German ISP, and we basically just centralized that process. Within 12 months, we were 8 people doing about 15 million euros of revenue. Had no frigging idea what was going on. I couldn't pay a bill. I thought annual accounts, I mean, they were annual, right? So we didn't really have to do any bookkeeping until then. So my reason for bringing a VC on board was actually more to bring a grown-up on board. So that was very much the values that I was looking at that point. I'll come a little bit back to that later. The second company, Organic Network, totally different space. Tried to build a social router from the bottom up, hired the first 802.11 engineers out of a company called No Wires Needed in Bilthoven, and try to recreate a Wi-Fi router where you could connect through your friends. Then one day, one of the engineers gave me a call. I was in Copenhagen, they were in Amsterdam. And they had hacked the Linksys access points. So the company never took off. This became a successful open source project called OpenWRT, which companies like Phone continue to build on and essentially created their business on top of. Then I took a year sort of searching for what was next. I had the good luck of back in 2001 meeting Tim O'Reilly. Fantastic thinker. For those of you who don't follow what he writes, what he thinks, what he talks about, what he publishes, what he has at conferences, he is definitely, he represented to me the alpha geekness, which I have always been looking for in my own projects and continue to do so today when investing. I was only working half-time, so of course I had to do a startup on the side. The company was Imity. This was late 2005, after having shut down the previous company. So this was pre-iOS, it was pre-GPS, but still we tried to do a mobile social network, location-based social network. So we were dealing with J2ME, Symbian 3, Symbian 2. Nokia still couldn't get their act together back then. We ended up merging this with another Danish company called SIB, which was sold to Vodafone, which became the horrible Vodafone 360 service, which some of you have at least been subsidizing. I think it cost them about $1 billion quid in total. So now you know why your phone bills are high. After Imity, I got to know a PhD student at University of Lund, southern Sweden. The Swedish university system is fantastic. The researchers, whether they're PhD students, professors, or anyhow affiliated, they own all their IP. So Jan Erik had been doing a PhD study. He'd gotten some fantastic computer vision algorithms for face detection, image recognition, and so forth. I met Jan Erik. We set up a company. We tried doing our own end user product. We amassed a couple of million users, but we're really unable to monetize this in any way whatsoever. Second wave was that mobile came around, 2009. We started porting it to there, started licensing it to a couple of companies, and ultimately Apple picked it up wanting exclusivity. So at that point, I decided that I had a little bit too much, or maybe my family had had a little bit too much of me being in an operational role. I think Reed from Netflix put it pretty well in that, as an entrepreneur, you always, you never take your startup for granted, but you pretty often take your family for granted. So part of my motivation was definitely, getting out of a role where I always felt that 20 more minutes was going to change the entire future of my startup. So I joined Sunstone. We're an early stage VC out of Copenhagen. We cover Northern and Central Europe, so as far north as Stockholm, a triangle basically between Stockholm, Budapest, and London here. We're 86 million euro fund. We do seed and A. And what I've been doing, I have to say that my I'm nowhere as disciplined as these gentlemen as with regards to what I look for, or what I invest in. But what I do look for is especially scalability on the output side. But that could be represented in many different ways. I mean, it could be anything from, so a couple of the companies I've invested in, Neo4j, which is the second biggest NoSQL database, Amen and Gidsi in Berlin. One's a mobile social network, the other is a community marketplace for activities. Podio, which is a collaboration, piece of collaboration, SaaS software web service, which we sold to Citrix earlier this year. And Makey Lab, a London-based company which does 3D printed action dolls with a small Arduino board in the head. And really what I'm looking for, whether this is an open source company like Neo4j, which does lead gen through being open source by the engineers actually being able to play with the product, work with the product, or whether it's Prezi in Budapest where users are I'm sorry Peter, this is not a Prezi, I should have been there. I always make the mistake. Where users create content generating new users and ultimately new paying users. So that's basically I think that's really at the core of things. So Phil asked us to if we could talk a little bit about the journey and some of the things which we as entrepreneurs now see on the VC side. Things which can be changed. I think it's very easy for me to go into a total rant, a total spin out of control about some of the systemic things which are wrong about this industry. Most of you know them already. These guys haven't been as corrupted because they've only been dealing with their own money. I'm actually dealing with other people's money, of course also a little bit of my own, but I think things like the short-sightedness of many VCs across Europe is definitely a huge issue and has been a huge issue in these 15 years of the VC industry growing up. And here one obvious element is something like management fees. We actually tried vehemently in our last fundraising to change the structure. I've seen VCs across the continent not killing companies or potentially not even selling companies that they could because they would lose their management fee. The carry was long gone. They recognized that they'd never be able to pay the fund back, so they'd never be making any money themselves. So the only way that they could be making money was through the management fees. Another obvious example are the washouts, which full ratchet terms, which are fortunately becoming less and less. Happening less and less. But the short-sightedness of seeing a VC wash out founders only to sell the company at whatever 5, 6, 7, 8 million euros, and in order to collect a little bit of the money which has been put out. And these guys are of course going out of business. Some are continuing to be subsidized by some of the local, some of the people who want to make certain that investment is happening local. But that is a huge issue, or has been a huge issue. I have to turn this and say I've seen entrepreneurs abuse the system as much as I've seen VCs, and I guess this is just a question of us being people doing business with each other. Transparency. I mean, entrepreneurs here are a pretty well-educated crowd, and I think we can thank Seedcamp and other programs like this for it. I think something like the Funded, AngelList, all of these systems are fantastic in really opening up for knowledge. But I do think still that there is a big obligation on us as VCs in really explaining the system. And you know, I'm happy to be able to do it sometimes in proxy of something like Seedcamp or directly. You know, I went through 4 companies and, you know, not really understanding a bunch of the fundamental aspects of a VC. Even though I thought I knew it, I didn't know what the impact was going to be in my reactions now as a VC towards an entrepreneur. One thing which I think you entrepreneurs still are going to hear often is that you know, oh, we don't invest in first-time entrepreneurs, or you know, you don't have an experienced management team and so forth. And I think that, you know, this is obviously very much an early stage crowd. I think what many of us VCs, we keep on telling ourselves, oh, we can fix the team, or you know, we can do that. But I mean, if we could fix the team, why the hell aren't we, the entrepreneurs ourselves, going out and building this and creating this? And I think, you know, you will see some VCs who are fantastic at the product cycle. I think a person like Fred Destin or my colleague partner Kristen Jepsen are amazing in really honing in on the aspects of the product which is going to make it immensely successful. But for the most case, we are not the ones who can go out and really make you guys work in the product cycle, you know, maximizing your product cycle. You know, Mark Andreessen, about his product market fit, I really like to split the product fit out from the market fit, because these two things require two very different types of competences. And I think that, you know, having a VC say that we can help in the product cycle, or we can help fix a product cycle, is absolutely impossible. But what we can do is that we can help with when we need to maximize the market cycle, when we need the experienced COO in there, when we need the sales teams who've built message labs from nothing to $200-300 million of revenue, or whatever, you know, something in that range. And I think that is an important thing to recognize. I think I made a mistake in my very first company of letting go so early. You know, this was the company where we were flush in cash, but we weren't really able to maneuver because I didn't have some of all the basic principles. But what I did was, instead of staying on as the CEO, I sort of moved into a CTO type role, doing the product, and letting somebody else manage the business, and starting to take product decisions on behalf of the company at a point where we weren't even 12 months old at that time. And I think that's a very, very dangerous situation. It's dangerous for the entrepreneur, and it's dangerous for the VC. So, you know, as these guys also said, you know, being a VC is a business, and you know, most VCs are actually less successful than most entrepreneurs. At least if you look around the landscape, right? The power curve of the VC successfulness versus, you know, I mean, you definitely do not join a VC to become filthy rich. That's, you know, then you go create your own company. So I think a recognition, you maybe go to become lazy, but that's a different thing. But the recognition of I'll take that upon myself. You can come slap me afterwards. All these things. So, but I think the recognition that this really is a business that we're into, you know, and I think there are a couple of things here, right? You know, one is some of the very small things, like, you know, what's the vintage of the fund that you're getting involved with? If you guys are getting involved with like a 2008 vintage, you Seedcamp companies are getting involved with a 2008 vintage company for seed investments, you know, 1 year down the road, you're going to have the firm knocking on your door, considering when they can sell you, or that's the mode we get in once we're past these 5 years, because we need to go raise our next fund, and we need to return cash, not stock, to our investors. The size of the fund is also extremely important. Every time we do a new investment, we obviously anticipate that this investment is going to be a star. Otherwise, we don't do it. And in our definition, a star is somebody who can return to us half of our fund. And I don't know what the metrics are for other VC firms, but they're probably somewhere along the same line. So there's a big difference in returning 45 million euros to Nikolaj, or returning 250 million to Saul. And I think that's important in recognizing who you're when you're dealing with investors. I also think you need to recognize that every single, and I think it's as much for us VCs. When I came into a partnership, a structure, a bunch of limited partners, a fund. I came 2 years into the last fund, so I've been here for 2.5 years, and we raised our third fund last December. These guys, they get to decide what they want themselves, right? But really recognizing that every new round, every investment it's a question about optimizing, maximizing the fund return. So if I have Message Labs on the one side and I have Star on the other, both are in my portfolio, and it's very clear that the Message Labs is going to be returning more, that's where I start leaning in, or at least that's where I should be starting to lean in. So I think that there is no such thing as entitlement. There's no such thing as entitlement for us VCs. There's no such thing as entitlement for an entrepreneur. You might as well consider this the last round, or you should at least consider this the last round you ever get from this VC, unless you perform. So I mean, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be there, being challenging, help challenge you guys, be helpful. I think those are the only two things we really can do as VCs do well. I mean, we of course bring money, but next time a VC tells you that you're a feature, I would hold up a mirror. And we as VCs can help you do these things, but it's really up to you to make them happen. We can be challenging. We can be helpful with everything from introductions to the first-time CEO who's never been through this before, and mentoring and recruiting and all of this. And I think that is really our true role as VCs, and I think that's how you should view us. I don't have slides for 3 more minutes, so I'm gonna stop it here. Creating more value than you capture. That's something which Tim O'Reilly has been saying over and over and over, and I think it's an immensely important lesson for you as entrepreneurs and you as VCs, and whatever we end up being 10 years down the road. Thanks.
Why don't we kick off with a couple of questions from the audience first, and maybe then when they pan out, we take the juicy questions that we received earlier. So from the entrepreneurs in the first row, and the Seedcamp entrepreneurs.
Kind of this, but when you're a developer, for example, when you're a developer and then you become a technical lead and then a manager, you start to understand some of the things you hated from your bosses. Is there anything in particular that now that you are VCs, you understand from the VCs you hated at the beginning?
As a developer, I think you better take that.
Me, a developer? No, I'm not. I can read code, but that's about as far I get down into that. I think that the fact that entrepreneurs who become VCs start very deal focused. And only later do we really recognize that we're dealing with that we have a portfolio that we need to honor, and that we have a set of LPs that we need to go through. But to be honest, I've had some of the worst fucking VCs ever, and I chose some of the worst ones myself. Among others because I thought these guys were not going to go in my way. I just wanted their money, and I think I do think that's a clear opportunity. But is there something where I really do understand? I do understand when it gets to the point where you need to decide not to put more money into a company. That's a tough decision because I think that I think we're all entrepreneurs, and I think most VCs do see themselves as entrepreneurs to a good extent. We're not just managers of the cash. Then we could just as well invest it in the public markets, right? So that is a difficult choice. We try to the extent possible that we wave goodbye to a company. We try to see if it makes sense for us to sell back the shares at €1 and give the entrepreneur another chance.
I think the thing that upset me the most about investors was when they were not respecting our company and respecting our time. So when it was obvious that they were giving you maybe 20% of their attention or 30% of their attention, i.e., you're coming to worship to the high priests of venture capital. And I believe, having been on both sides, that it should be a two-way process. And of course, the company, the entrepreneur, has to sell their opportunity, but I believe the investor should be giving them due respect and attention, and they should be selling their position in the same way. And I really don't like their kind of, superiority and lack of attention and stuff like that. It makes me crazy, having been there myself. And I try and, if anything, err on the other side and probably spend too much time, but I'd rather do that.
Like that you identified the first-time CEO issue. I didn't quite understand, maybe I missed it, that what you guys do to help us there. And I look at people like Andreas and Horowitz who make it the point of their fund to turn entrepreneurs into CEOs. And they also have a lot of other ancillary kind of departments that help out in all of the stuff that we maybe don't need to focus on. And maybe you can talk to that a little bit.
I think for us, the typical entrepreneur that we invest in, or the company, might have sort of 10 to 12 people, 2 founders, something like that. So this is a small, probably very informal kind of organisation. It's organic and so on and so forth. And if it's a home run, then that might be the size of the board. Message Lab's board, when we sold it, had over 700 people distributed all around the world, and the board was probably 12 people, I would have thought. So it's how do you augment immediately? You're kind of thinking like you do with what's the next product decision? It's going to perhaps make me go faster. You think about, well, what are the things organisationally that might need to go faster? You see what I mean? So, it's a natural process that if you're going to build a big business, you're going to be more than the company in scale. You're going to be more in company size that you are. So you're constantly thinking about what does all of your portfolio need in terms of making those next big steps. And
I'm a big believer in founder CEOs. I just think that the founder is immersed in the business, has taken the business from their dreams to an actual physical entity. Plus, they have a huge stake in the business. They have a stake in terms of their shareholding. They have a stake in terms of their time and their money. That level of commitment, that level of immersion, I just don't think you can ever get from an outside CEO. So I think certainly for the first few years, you need that level of immersion to get the business into the next phase. And so I'm a big believer in it.
Well, how do you replicate that? That's the, you know, from a VC, you can't replicate that founder, if you see what I mean.
Nobody has that level of insight. I think, you know, to address what specifically do, I mean, again, I haven't been in this space for that long, but to take, but what's already the pattern which is becoming clear to me is that at the early phases there's a shitload of mentoring, of coaching, of addressing very specific issues. You know, I helped do the full options program for Neo4j in Sweden. But quickly when you took part of every senior recruitment up until the time when Emil attracted his COO Lars Nordmal, who had been through Sugar CRM, Pentaho, a couple other other early open source companies, and seen what had happened there. Then suddenly Emil had somebody, not just trying to help him on a weekly basis or however often we could talk, but who was actually embedded in there with him. I don't believe in taking functions away from you guys. I mean, I have a big rant against incubators. I mean, that should, this is going to sound harsh, but I mean, it's those companies should probably never have been born, right? But it's not about, if you can't deal with that stuff, then yeah, I mean, you figure out. But it's, for me, it's the important things like recruitment, like developing your organization, those type of decisions that you're making in growing the company, not necessarily with the product, but then also helping pinpoint what are the important things to continue to look at on the product from the product perspective. I don't know if that was.
Yeah, I've actually got just a follow up on that about, so you get all these kind of very young CEOs, and then you need to build out the executive team. But how do you? Isn't there a problem like getting more experienced COOs, for example, to work with a guy who's so young, and like there's more control? How does that work out?
So one of my sorry. So the question was, how do you get these senior execs to work with these young blokes? And I think from my perspective, there's one. Everybody talks about the team, and like there's no fucking way to quantify that. So from my perspective, I always look for a magnet. I think that's the best analogy. Somebody who can attract other great people. And somebody who can attract other great people can definitely work with other great people.
What's the best way to find leverage when you're negotiating with VC to get better terms?
I think the best way is definitely to have competitive tension in the deal, and
preferably from Andreessen Horowitz.
I think you do that by trying to nurture these relationships before you need money, and then work through that long list, short list selection kind of process as much as you can. If you're pinning your hopes on one VC, you just don't have any leverage, really. I mean, you can make out that you do, but it'll sort of come out in the wash, I think.
I guess the only thing I'm using from economics any longer is game theory.
Don't you find VC boring compared to?
When did you send this email? Was it this morning?
Yeah.
Is this what I woke up to this, right?
Yeah.
It's really funny.
So I think I find it stimulating. I have to say that I always had one or two projects on the side, which were, where I'd be an advisor or even a small angel investor or something like that, to sort of, because sometimes you just need to get something else out of, into your head. Seen from my perspective, I always loved that, and I think that was really my core motivation for going. But hell, does it itch when I talk to you or see some other project or, feel that I could do something even better? Of course it does. So,
Shall I use the mic?
We can repeat the question.
Okay. All right, everyone bitches about European ecosystem for raising money.
I think I've got your question here, actually.
But from your point of view, both as investors and entrepreneurs, basically the gist of it is like, what can we do as entrepreneurs? Like everyone, when we see VCs, it's like at the stage that a lot of the seed companies are at. When we see VCs, they want to see this already, and obviously we can't show them that. And angels, like, it's difficult. So how can we as entrepreneurs and you as investors make that better? That's my question.
You mean?
How can we improve that as a whole?
You mean have more of a US style kind of
pit
bubble?
The US, because everyone says, oh, it's so great in the US, but it's different out there, and Europe is different. So we don't have to have the same solution to them. How do we build as founders, as investors together an ecosystem that's more conducive to raising money or helping? Maybe it's not the same answer as what's out there.
But the problem is that we don't have an ecosystem
Yeah, that's
here,
right.
and we're never going to have an ecosystem here. You know, for a full ecosystem to be there has to be somebody bigger eating you all the time. At some point they shit something out that the very bottom starts feeding off again, right? That's the biological definition of an ecosystem.
Someone tweet that, please.
Yeah, the cameras got back on. So I mean, we don't have the big companies acquiring, but I do think that the time is definitely, is working for us, and I think that to give the Seedcamp people a pat on the back is that just exposing the fact that Europe is more than London. Startup Europe is more than London. I think that's immensely helpful. And these guys, they put down, what, in your first fund, 30, 40 million?
Yeah, we're up to 60
million
million total committed.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of stuff obviously helps.
I think things are getting better. I think that London is becoming more and more of a hub for tech in Europe. I think Europe, one of the problems is it's just completely fragmented. There's different countries, different languages, different cultures. So obviously all the best bits of across Europe need to come together around central hubs, because then they're going to work more effectively together. But there's lots of pockets of talent, pockets of expertise around it, but it's just all too spread out. So I think the hubs, there's a hub developing in London, there's a hub developing in Berlin, and there are things that Europeans can do better, like we're generally better at bootstrapping, we're better at entering new markets, understanding new cultures, understanding languages. And I think also just I'd like to see European companies showing more ambition and a more willingness to get over to the States, rather than just being the European leader and get bought by your US counterpart, talking about your terms, talking about yourself in real, truly global terms. But I think it is getting better.
I have to say that also I lost my train of thought. I think there's actually the most important thing which has happened in the last 10 years for Startup Europe has been the low-cost airlines, because we're suddenly interfacing with each other. So I think the next important thing which should happen is like the total loss of roaming fees, right? In order to get this, and then the last thing which I would really like to see, the reason why London, this island, and Berlin are successful is because those are the only two places in Europe. Barcelona had it 15 years ago, but they're the only two places in Europe where you can attract foreign talent. So we need to drop our xenophobia here in Europe, particularly in places like my home country, Denmark, because that's a huge stumbling block for Europe to be successful.
So for me, the like dropping the xenophobia,
by the way.
partly comes from the VCs saying, like, okay, I'm not going to give you a US valuation because your market is inherently smaller. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I've heard people say that.
I think there is a discount on European companies. I think we would discount it at message apps. But
I think
you got to get
paying
out.
the same in euros as the others are paying in dollars.
Well, the exchange rate was better back then, so we did. Our pounds were worth more. I think there is a discount, but I think the only way you can address that is by getting over and being competitive in the US and saying we're not a European company, we're a global company.
Yeah, but we're a European company. But you got, like, VCs don't see it like that immediately. They're like, focus on your local market first, get it right there. You can't like say, oh, I'm immediately a European company.
No, you do, but you've got to accept that European valuations to start with. Off the back of that, start to expand globally, and then you'll be valued on a more global level. It's like a staged process.
Related question. Why do you think a lot of European startups are not succeeding in the US? You mentioned that there are a few cases that really Europeans are not succeeding.
Well, I think a lot of them don't have the ambition to. So I think a lot of them, they're just happy to be the European leader and then get sold to the US leader. So I think there's an attitude problem. There's a kind of glass ceiling. And there's lots of companies I can think of that have done that. So I think a lot of it is in the attitude.
Yeah, it is. I think it is changing a bit. The other thing is, I mean, for our own personal experience, I mean, we were, you know, Message Labs looks great on the outside, but on the inside, it's probably just like all your businesses, where there's a lot of stuff that doesn't really work, doesn't work how we want it to work. We're always a very C- can do better. What that actually means is year one in the UK, we were 90% off plan. So we needed enough money to fail. We needed enough kind of collective psychology around the table to deal with failure. And then we went to the US, we failed. And then we put that right. So, you know, it looks easy when you look back, but actually the reality, it's just like you guys, you know, it's just, you know, you needed to be 100% committed that you were going to do whatever it was to crack America, and then the irrespective kind of thing came in that enabled you to go do that. And it would have been easy to sell it. I think we had some pretty decent, you know, technology acquisition type values very, very early on where we could have sold for those. But, you know, it ended up being our biggest market. We had more people there than we had in the UK, more customers, more users, and so on and so forth. But it could have been quite easy to have low ambition at that point and still do well in relative terms for us. But you've got to really want to succeed. I think the other thing is the US companies, if they succeed locally, of course, they're already big. But actually, when they internationalise, they don't internationalise very well, which is back to Joss's point. European founders are far more better, and companies are better at understanding how to replicate their success in their home market in international markets.
Well, should be better anyway.
Yeah.
So, 2 more questions. One over there, and then you pick the one you like best from the.
Is it the one with the swearing, or? Yeah.
Joss, you were talking about fragmentation in Europe. So let's split it. What's happening on the investor end? So would the Western European investors in general co-invest in Central Eastern European VCs? So is the market fragmented in that respect?
Would we invest in any market in Europe? Is that?
No, what I'm asking, whether would you co-invest with any Central Eastern European investors?
Yeah. Yeah, I think if we were looking at a market like Estonia or somewhere like that, we would either be encouraging that business to move to somewhere like the UK, just because there's advantages to that and it's closer to us, or we would be looking to invest with a local investor. We wouldn't want to make an investment in somewhere like Estonia or Poland or wherever without a local investor, because I think you need to have at least one investor who's got their feet on the ground. So I think that's the way that we'd approach it.
Or an angel.
Or an angel, yeah.
I actually think London is at a disadvantage to you know, the only thing about this island thing here. You know, Copenhagen is within a 2-hour flying radius of most of Europe, and I think that's, you know, personally, that's a huge benefit for me.
So 6:30 a.m. we got this email, which is some of your questions that Philip's been trying to squeeze out of you over the last couple of days.
At the party last night.
Is it at the party? So I do the party ones. How can I identify a good VC? I mean a VC that won't screw me over when it gets tough. So this was 6, we fell about laughing with these. Why do people seem to lose their entrepreneurial understanding as soon as they manage money? Is there a way to change that? It's great. How can I talk to a founder VC, enjoy his knowledge and understanding, but not share too much of my problems? I want to get insights, but when I pitch, I might share too much negatively with him. So, you know, where are the other ones? Why the fuck are there so few good investors in Europe? So I think we've covered quite a few of those points. I think, look, you know, I think Joss's point is really interesting around the sort of interface between entrepreneurs and VCs. It's not going to see the headmaster. The VCs need to always look at themselves and do a better job at, you know, how do they demonstrate their brand and their entrepreneur empathy, how they nurture an ecosystem, you know, and ultimately on the other side, you can use those networks that sit around all of us to present your businesses to the right firms at the right time, you know, during the right vintage, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So
I do think
the European VCs, by the way, they'll get weighed and measured anyway.
I do think trying to have your interests aligned is one of the most important things. So to talk to the founders of the portfolio companies, of the investors that you're thinking about, and listen to what they've got to say about what kind of investors, you know, they've been. I mean, we took money from a company called Madison Dearborn, who are based in Chicago, and we presented to them, and we had about £6 million of revenue in 2000, the dot-com boom. We presented them at Heathrow for an hour, and they got their checkbook out. They wanted to write a check for 20 million quid at a £120 million pre-money valuation, and we thought that was brilliant. We thought, well, just take the money. You know, it doesn't matter about anything else. They're writing a huge check. It's a huge valuation. It was a big mistake. They moved into venture capital because of the dot-com boom. They're really a big private equity buyout shop. They moved out of venture capital as quickly as they moved into venture capital once the dot-com crash happened. And then we very, very quickly had a major investor who didn't give a shit about message ads, just wanted to get us off their books, and had no value to add, no interest in the company. And we'd have been much better off taking a good investor at a lower valuation. It doesn't make that much difference anyway. It's only a few percentage points. Much, much better to get the right fit than to get all starry-eyed about the money, which we absolutely did, and it came back to bite us.
All right. Thanks, guys.